See, I tell people that complain about the length of our service, I'm like, come on, a great church. So, so there's a, sorry if my posture is, as I sit into the present moment, it is hurried, and I don't want that to be transmitted to you. So I say that so you could be aware that I'm the only priest on today, which is fine. And then I had a full couple of weeks of being present with Dr. Gunner and Marge and the funeral yesterday. So I tend to get, maybe you do too, when there's a lot on your plate, you hurry. That's opposite of meditation, by the way. And so I have a tendency to want to get move it along, and that's may not be helpful to what you would be feeling from me now. Which is why yesterday I asked Nick to be with me, because he'll modulate that with me and help. As I think about this idea of meditation, and hopefully I give you some tools to begin to cognitively incorporate the idea of what meditation is, it will give you permission to continue a practice, change your pieces of practice, and David's also going to teach centering prayer. He does that very well. And so we're going to continue to do this. There's something here, there's a genius to it that I'll talk about. So Nick is a cohort with me today, so don't be shy. So the art of meditation. By the idea of saying those two things together, we have to parcel them out. The first is art. And if we define what is art, how would you dialogue about what is art? What would you say art is? How would you define art? Not as a person, but...
I think it's in the eyes of the beholder.
So art has something that is preserved, which is really an important piece, is preserved within the integrity or within the soul or the heart of the person. And certainly artists speak this way. If I had to ask the choir, and I won't because I don't want to embarrass them, I said, do you sing music or does music sing you? John, what? I mean, when I say that, John, you understand that piece, right?
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
Both.
Yeah. So that's stretching that out a little bit about what that means. Is that there is this reciprocity between the idea of an utterance to sing a note, and then the note is singing me. When I'm trying to teach my daughters about spirituality, in some ways they entertain me, because here's what you don't know about young people. I was telling somebody yesterday who was a Roman Catholic who came. There was at our table, there was some conversation. Did you see that? A lot of conversations. The Roman Catholics came over to me at brunch, because yesterday at this celebration of life, we said in a hospitable way, and I assure that if you're here and you feel an inclination to come and eat, we want you to eat with us in this sacred meal. And so there was this moment of crisis for some Roman Catholics. One was trying to text their priest to get permission, and came to me and was telling me about that. And I'm like, there is nobody in my parish that ever texts me anything to ask me permission about anything. And they're like, so I said that.
The anxiety on people's faces.
I wouldn't like it, but it would be interesting. All right, I've had 2 martinis, Chris. Can I have a third? Hell yeah, you can. You're the Episcopal Church. Exclamation point. I don't know why I said that, but it denotes a way that we are together for sure. And I'm trying to teach my daughters about spirituality, and they have collectively, young people today, if you had to calibrate, now this is silly, you always have to allow me some silliness, because in the expression of words and concepts, it's not completely accurate, right? We have to say that. Which is funny, because when I preach, I'm like, well, why do I even preach? Because it's not even necessary, really. And I'll tell you why, because that's the heart of being the meditating person. But, so allow me this. We say calibrate, because that's a mathematical idea. On a scale of 0, which is death, this isn't my study. It's based on kinesthetic study, has done this before, and I can show you the authors who have done this. It's fascinating to look at. And it's on a 1,000-point scale. And they calibrate Jesus. Where would you calibrate Jesus? On a 0 is death, 1,000, I mean, I'm not even sure. 1,000 is probably complete universe, cosmos. Where is Jesus? I mean, you want to give him a pretty high one, right? Because it's Jesus. I mean, the Unitarian Church would say, he's at 100, and don't push me. You know, Jesus is really, I don't know, 7-something on the scale. Mother Teresa, lower 7s. You know, Buddha gets a good rank. I mean, this is why I told you to give me some latitude, because you can see some ridiculous in what I'm talking about. The real heart of that question is collectively, and I always think about this as a community, where do we calibrate spiritually? And the young people I work with, where they calibrate. Where did I calibrate when I was growing up collectively from an evolutionary point spiritually? Because there is an evolution spiritually, right? So, you know, when I was growing up, maybe 274. And there, when you read the characteristics of that scale, you know, my colleagues growing up, we were able to accept things that were not true. Right? I mean, untruth was okay. It was seen as a part of, well, let's just play with it, a part of the political process, right? Oh, that's just politics. This is a good one, because this will illustrate what I'm talking about. Let's just take it politically. Politically, we might calibrate around 270, and we would say, we understand that a politician could speak, and we give them permission not to speak truth. Right?
We do.
Well, wait now. Don't get too crazy with me.
We do.
Now, let me tell you which pushes you. The younger people behind you, I don't know how many generations, no longer tolerate the idea that somebody could speak and not speak truth. Whatever truth is, and that's a different concept, but that also is in a spiritual place too, because truth must be universal. I mean, truth is not about an argumentation. Truth it does not have an argument to it. It just is what it is. Like we breathe, right? Would anybody argue with me about that? If I say, you breathe. Oh, I don't, Chris. Then I'm going to wait, because now I'm going to be planning your funeral if you say you don't, right? So young people calibrate higher. And this is what we see. They have a vocabulary, they use words like globalization. Right? When I was growing up, somebody in Russia was going to lean on the red button, and bad things were going to happen. Now they grew up with concepts like terrorism. And I mean, this is not a part of it, but it's just saying that how they calibrate their lives different spiritually. When I've been here 5.5 years now, some students have been with me for 5 years, and they have a deep meditative life. They could do it for hours. And the reason is because they calibrate higher. When I started out working with young people, we would use words like prayer. Let's pray to God. If I said to these students now, let's pray to God, they'd say, is dinner ready? Because the only time they have a posture that way, that's articulate that way, they're saying a blessing for a meal. But when I say, let's be with each other, in a place where we understand the mutual indwelling of God within us, they say, then we're going to meditate. It would blow you away. You could be a guest with me any Sunday evening. Their level of calibration spiritually, I'm just telling you, is higher than us, and hopefully that comforts you. So, in teaching my daughters about spirituality, they're all dancers. And I tell them, when you finish your dance, is your goal to find a particular spot on the floor. They dance on, I forget, you have to, what do you dance on? It's that gray squishy material. They don't dance on wooden floors. There's a special material they dance on.
We used to dance on wood floors.
Oh.
Of course.
I danced on
Obviously,
wood
there's
floors.
been lots of evolutionary calibration for better things.
Absolutely.
So I tell them, when they're dancing or when they're performing, is their goal to end on a spot on the floor? And what do they say?
Sometimes.
What do they say? I mean, they would look at me like you look at me, and that's ridiculous. If I said to the choir, is your goal to finish singing and being done at a certain time, the choir would look at me like, no, but your sermon, it should. Right?
Yeah.
Those that are going to the next sermon, we'll talk about that too. But they say that's ridiculous. That when we start to play a piece musically, it isn't that we time it. It isn't that the finishing is the goal. Do you understand what I'm saying?
If that were true, of course, the fastest symphonies would be the best.
And is that true?
No.
Right, because there we go, Charlie. It doesn't calibrate as true, because it's just not true. If it were, we would feel uncomfortable. And that's the other thing, when I tell people they want to say, I want to know what truth is, pay attention to what's going on the internal piece of you, because it's a good barometer. And Nick, you can, at any time you can.
Yeah, you're kind of touching on the why approach prayer from this perspective. One of the things you've often raised is the ego piece. And one of the things that meditation does is it's a practice for quieting the mind. The mind is part of the ego in a sense. And if you ever think about how often you think, your brain is constantly going, and you just go with it unconsciously. Unconsciously, you go where your mind takes you. And when we talk about the mutual indwelling of Christ, we talk about that divine spirituality that lives within each of us. If your mind is just going and going and going and going, you're leaving that behind. You're not listening to that mutual indwelling piece.
This is where centering prayer will really help, because it's a simplistic way not to chase the thought. That's what and you introduced me to it. And then I said, okay, let's continue to work this practice. And I went, oh, this is pretty easy. It gives you permission for the thought, because you cannot not think. And people they say, I can't stop my thoughts.
And you're not supposed to.
Yeah, it's impossible.
It's actually a practice for you to separate yourself from the thought. Instead of letting the thought run away with you, you watch it. There is a Buddhist metaphor where the thoughts come in like balloons and then I let it go. Let the thought come in like the next balloon and let it go.
So
you can watch it and see it and learn from it.
Right.
Know thyself.
Don't attach to it.
Don't attach to it. And then you're giving yourself opportunity to be able to separate yourself from your thought, which gives you the opportunity to feel yourself.
So the idea of art, if we had to keep going about what is art, and we had to say, let's bring in all the materials that are expressive of art in here. Maybe you'd bring your dance shoes back. You still have them?
Mm-hmm.
Do you still dance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's good for my daughters to know.
I'm not 100
Not that
yet,
you're a
I'm
senior
going
or
that
anything,
direction.
but you're older than my daughter, so that's good. So if we had to bring in all the materials that would be expressive art, John, I don't know, he might bring in a sheet music. Maybe not, maybe not, I don't know. But wait, drawing materials, camera, whatever. You would understand that as, I'll gravitate towards something. But if I said to you, Cynthia, you can't pick up, what would yours be? Would you draw? Yeah, I think maybe you would draw, and yet you picked up a camera. I'd say you can't do that because that's not art. There would be something within you that would. I'll make sure my phone was first say like go to hell, and then the second part would be, no, you would never say that actually, which is funny. Some of your colleagues might. The other part of you would begin to identify, but this speaks to me. This is the expression, and that's that paying attention to the mutual indwelling of that thing that's internal that speaks to me. So here's the trick. When we say the art of meditation, if I came in here today and said, this is how you meditate, it would be the same thing that Charlie pointed to. You would know that I was not telling you the truth. I can't tell you how you meditate. Now, the funny thing is that we have images of meditation. What are your images of meditation? When I hear them, I laugh, because they say, I could never meditate. And I say to somebody, well, what do you think meditation is? I could never get into the lotus position. I'm thinking, you think I get into the... I'm always amazed to see it. And in my practice, I go global. And when I hang out with the Hindu in meditation, these people like to sit on the floor. And they don't like it because they're into the science of it. When you hang out with a Hindu master, like yogis, or I mean, there's a certain particular science that they apply to it. It's called the inner engineering. They love that piece. And inner engineering means when they say, Chris, you got a nice thin mat, deal with it. Because I'm like, where's my chair? And it's got to be a lazy boy that goes like this. I'm like, now that's poor inner engineering. Because they talk about the straight spine and other things. So there's an image that people have about meditation. And typically, when I explore it, it's this weird image. I'm like, yeah, if that's it, we're all in trouble. Because I don't see that a lot. Some do. I mean, you can go to some temples and some teach. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But that's the particular art for that particular person. Does that make sense? So the question is, what is meditation? If we know that you have an artistic way that is codified within you, a particular, which is great about the Episcopal Church, because we say in the Episcopal Church is that your piety is yours and I cannot determine your piety. That was the conversation we had yesterday with some Catholics that wanted to come up but didn't, and they were trying to text their priests. I'm like, who's telling you who your piety is? Well, it's clear. They were looking for the clearinghouse, and I'm like, oh, in the Episcopal Church, that doesn't exist. And then we laughed, and I said, but the good thing is you go to church on Sunday. And they said, well, of course, because Father would. Like, yeah, our attendance is low. And so that's the other piece. What is that piece that begins to speak and resonate? I was working with somebody yesterday talking about that. They were stuck on that word. What does that mean? John, you could probably give us a compelling lecture about what that is, which is really fascinating. Those things that resonate, I mean, they're tonalities. I'm fascinated to see how it works. There's a syncopation that happens that if we put a stringed instrument in a room and harmonize at a certain level, I'm not sure what you call it, but the string instrument would pick up on it and begin to vibrate at the same level.
It's resonance.
Resonance. Is that pretty cool?
There are entire healing modalities that deal with music and sound, because physics has taught us we're nothing more than vibrations. Electrons, protons, neutrons, they're just vibrations.
So when you think about Jesus' healings, it's not fantasy. You begin to see that how healing works and how touch works, and Reiki comes into this around paying attention to these energy levels. So what I want you to really understand is that if you have an idea about meditation, it may not be the idea for you. I said to one of my spiritual directors, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I was terrible at the monastery. I was the most rebellious. In my mind, I was the most rebellious. It felt like I was rebelling, because why would you be silent? It seems so unproductive. And then they talk about this rule of life. And I tried to practice a rule of life, and I was awful at it. Terrible. And I met with my spiritual director, Brother Curtis. I really respect him. And Brother Curtis, he said, how's your rule of life? That comes up in the conversation. If you hang out with a monk, it's coming up. So like pre-brief yourself, right? And he said, how's your meditation? Well, Brother Curtis, it's bad. Why is it bad? Because I can't do it. And he said, then you're not doing yours. And I went, oh. So this is what I'm telling you about meditation. It has to be yours. Now there are ways and inroads into it that get you on the pathway. In the sermon today at 10, if you go to that, and those that were at 8, I talk about how do you get on the road, not to meditation, but in your spiritual life, and how is it supplemented in this way. So it has to be yours. And you say, how do I discover mine? Typically, when people come to me in spiritual direction, they say, Chris, I want to discover my inroad to this contemplative way. One of the first places I go is into a spontaneous awakening. I want to sit with you and say, let's go to a place in your life where you knew everything was in alignment, where you were you and God was God and everything was perfect. I don't know when that is for you. Maybe it is when you were taking a walk and a flock of birds landed, geese landed on a pond. And in that fluttering and the splashing, you stopped. However brief that moment was, you breathed in and you just knew. You discovered an intimacy that was always there, that you weren't paying attention to. And I don't know what that is for you. Nature is a powerful one. It has its own energy field. When some people are stuck, it's not, and we go into nature because it has its own rhythm, right? I mean, nature really doesn't give a whole crap about what you're worried about. And I love that. So what your spontaneous moment in life? When my kids were born, it didn't last long. The moment where, like, when Kunta Kinte said, held up and said, "Behold, one greater than you." And so there's spontaneous moments you can lean into already. People say, "I'm seeking God," and I tell you that's a mistake. Because the process of seeking will cause you to miss it. Because God seeks you. Right? Isn't it arrogant to say, "I'm seeking God"? And then I talk to people, I'm like, "What's that about?" And then typically I get this behavioral list. My seeking involves, I'm like, "Well, I got a duck at home that's pretty good Christian." Because my duck doesn't do any of the things that, and then we get into this other codified way. You'll hear some of that in the sermon today too. And yet you still miss it. Because the it seeks you. And ultimately you are it. Remember the game you played? I loved it, work with youth around this. Tag your what?
You're it.
So we stopped doing that. But that was true. Because when you got tagged, there was an affirmation that you are the it, and that's the mutual indwelling. And we hear this in the scriptures. Actually, in the collect at 8, we heard this. That Christ is there, and I am Christ with Christ. And so there's this mutual indwelling. And so the spontaneous places are where I typically start with people. Where is this in a spontaneous way appearing in your life? And it concerns me when people say, "Never." It can happen. And I'm like, okay, you are in danger. You are in real danger. Because you have interpreted your life in such a way that it is not meant to be interpreted. And we talk about our plates too full, and that can be a real impediment to getting around to who am I in relationship to the one who created me. But it's uniquely you. So spontaneous is only one way, but it's a way that I typically will lead people in. Let's talk about on your walk. I know Alex takes walks in the morning. That's Alex's. I don't think I'm disclosing anything.
No, go ahead.
The whole community can see you walk in the morning.
Yes.
So Alex, that's his moment of contemplative, meditative posture of making himself available to what is with him. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I've discovered one more, too.
Oh, you added one. That's
At
great.
the end of the day, I try and play a symphony.
Oh, yeah. Music's a great one. And I will, because my house is pretty active, I will get into chakra balancing tonalities that I'll listen to that helps that energy field. Because it's hard in my house because my girls like to emote when somebody wears their shoes or something. And there's a lot of energy that goes into that invites, I try not to get involved, but it invites some intervention. My first intervention is Julie, and then the second one, it's me. So I will wear noise canceling things that help that. But and I try not to be dependent upon that. Some of my spiritual directors want me away from it. But that's a great way to create a resonant.
One of the common things that you hear about is relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're looking for that seed practice, it's what do you do to relax yourself? And that's usually a place where you can go to find the seed of a meditative practice. Walks. You hear people say, "I love walks by the beach." Well, that's because you're walking with nature and you're shutting yourself off. And you're allowing yourself to just be. Music is another perfect one. So that's another one. If you're looking for a way in, you look for what do you do to relax yourself? And that's usually a way to open the door to a meditative
I think it's easier to get into those zones in meditation the older I get, because I don't have demands that somebody who's in the work field.
Right. So I try to take that, I try to take what you say and put you to, again, it's language, so allow me to say this, to put you together with a younger person. Because life didn't change, you changed it.
Well,
Life spoke to you in a way that you
Right.
said, I have to, I mean, either you said, if I keep doing what I did when I was younger, it would kill me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's still listening. Or you discovered something else. But you, I mean, so this is why it's really important that you talk to young people, because what I typically find when I, young people, they, and maybe you do too, sleep with their cell phone next to the bed.
yeah, that's terrible.
It's dangerous. The only reason I do is because I'm afraid I'm afraid one of you is going to need me and I won't be there, and that scares me. Literally, when I talk to some people, they say, "Yeah, my boss texted me at 1 o'clock in the morning,"
No, not allowed.
and I'm like, you wouldn't like what I would text your boss. I mean, there would be some like nice words like, well, I won't say them in here, but are you kidding me? And the sense of the first thing they do when they get up is,
Check that phone.
okay, now you have that's the piece where your inner engineering is not complementary to helping you.
I see people at the health club on a
Yeah, we've
machine.
talked about that
Oh,
before.
That's crazy. I mean, you're there maybe 40 minutes.
Oh, maybe that's-
Yeah.
Something that's drawing me in this room is that tree out there. It's got a big knot.
I mean, the good news is it isn't falling down, it isn't on fire.
No, it's interesting.
But your observation of that with somebody that's over-programmed, the first observation would be, how is that tree going to hurt me? So I'm painting a picture for you in an artistic way. So the first thing we know is that, that you not have to, because there is no have to. There is a permission that exists in your life that says, your life is beautiful, let's discover it. And it's going to be different for everybody. I mean, you might have similarities, because I mean, lots of people walk. Right? Lots of people will go to the gym. So that's important to know. Find freedom from what you think meditation is. And let's have fun with it. We'll work with you. Let's talk about it. As Alex and I have talked about, let's talk about it. And does it always stay the same? It doesn't for me, because my rule, don't take my rule as, if you say that I'm the example, then you'd be creating an image. We don't do that here. I just say it's just how I do it. I mean, I get up today at 3. When I preach, I get up at 3. Because I have some extra things to pray about, to listen to. When I say I pray, I'm not on my knees saying, "Dear God, protect me from those evil people at Grace Church." That's not even a really realistic prayer. "Dear God, strike those people down." No, that's Old Testament prayer, right? There's more I have to do. And we could talk about this some other time. But every day, 3 hours, I'm in meditation. Or I couldn't do this job well. Now, when I retire and do something different, I know that'll change. There won't be the necessity for me to be in that posture of listening that long. I don't think, because I want to save sea turtles. I think that in and of itself will begin to nurture me differently. So, for me, it's a long time, and I do it somewhere in the day, and then another 2 hours before I go to bed. And that's where I specifically pray for you by name. In the evening, that's where my prayer. Sometimes in the morning, if you are in a critical place, I hold you in meditation in the morning, and I'll send you a note. Sometimes you'll get a note from me saying, "I'm thinking about you." You're like, "Oh my God, I'm going to die today." I don't think so, but and so will that practice change? I think it will, and there are times I take breaks from that, and I can't continually sustain that. I'm meant to like have a Sabbath from myself. You ever done that? Taking a Sabbath from yourself? Like, has anyone ever told you, Charlie, take a break from being Charlie?
All the time.
Oh, yeah. So what is meditation? When people come to me and they struggle with the idea of what is meditation, they've already taken something and separated it from themselves. The mind works in opposites. And this is what Nick was talking about, how the mind and the ego can begin to become a distraction. Because meditation is not something that you do. If you come at it that way, you're going to be frustrated. And lots of people do. They say, well, this is what I do. All right, keep coming back to me, because there's a point. I'll say, do you still do that? No, I gave up. Why? Because ultimately there wasn't the discovery of I am meditation. It's not something I go and do. It's the discovery of who and what I am. And that's where the intimacy with God exists. And Jesus. And so it's not something you do. Now it's funny because one of my Sadhguru, that I study with, he makes fun of how yoga has become American and it's become sold. It makes him giggle. It makes me giggle. It makes him giggle. Because yoga's, getting your body in shape can assist in the inner engineering. That's a big word, but that's not yoga. Yoga. Does anyone know what yoga means? So it means unity. It is the unification, and that's what I'm talking about. You don't do yoga, you are yoga. But if somebody wants to make money, you got to go pay to go do it. Does that make sense? And it's fine. I mean, all the different forms of yoga, that can help. But you get down to the essence of what real yoga is. I did it. I thought I was going to be twisty, and I said at the end, I thought we were going to twisty. There was no twisty that went on. It was that spacious moment's time of allowing time to be there to come into the discovery that the unification is within me, the Christ is within me, the God that dwells within me. Judy, did you have something?
I can understand the concept that it's not something I do, but it's something that is I am. But I don't understand the reality of it. I understand the concept, I do things or I am things.
So, I thank you so much for saying that.
Great question.
I love it, but we've out of time. No, I'm kidding. I have a few minutes. You have taken me that question I can understand. What I love about that is you've demonstrated, because the mind is, I just said the mind works in a particular way. You can't understand what I'm saying. You can only experience what I'm talking about.
I can understand. I accept that.
Yeah, see, the mind's okay with that because we called it on its game. Because as soon as you call the mind and the ego on its game of opposites and comparisons, as soon as it knows it can't do it with that, it gives up and says, okay, I understand. Because it still wants to exist. Because the mind will, this is great. Thank you so much. This is so much fun. Because the mind will, first, I don't understand. Right, because you can't. You have to experience it. Oh, I understand that. Because the mind was just called on its game. Then the mind goes, okay, I'm going to wait, because I was called on my game. I mean, some of this I'm making up, but it works. The mind says, okay, you got me, I'm backing up. You got it, you've taken me to a place, there are no comparisons, there are no opposites, there is no duality, because we're talking about experience. I got it. And then you go into the experience, and then the mind says, well, was that a good experience? See, then it re-engages you on your experience. Well, that wasn't the best experience, was it? I love it when people compare worship. Well, Father Bob preached better than you. I'm like, okay, you were clearly in a comparison off track with your mind right now. Because it's about that experience at the moment that Bob was speaking, I was speaking, you took the sacrament, you sang the words, has nothing to do with where your mind just took you. It's about being 100% totally present to that particular moment. And when you call the mind on its games, it stops. But then it finds these back weird doors sometimes. And a lot of that's why I sit with directors, because it gets really clever. And the mind keeps creeping in. One way it keeps creeping in, I hear this a lot, is I can't shut my thoughts off. Okay, that's impossible. But the mind wants to say you should be able to. And then we get into higher levels of spiritual development, if there's such a thing, which there isn't. Then we say, well, I'm not enlightened, or I am enlightened. That's another concept of comparison, because you have to compare about what it means to be not versus is, and that's not what it's about.
You know, the thing I like about the Episcopal Church, and I've always liked, is that we don't have to go to church for the sermon. You can have some really bad sermons, but you've got a beautiful liturgy.
We're grateful because most of the Episcopal priests are bad at it. Right? We don't preach well. I mean, you know, Dan Meyer's a good friend of mine. I was so humbled. He stopped by on Thursday to spend the evening with me and just listen to my life. I like Dan a lot. He's Christchurch Oak Brook. Great man. There's pressure. Dan and I talk about this because I said, Dan, every Sunday you have to calibrate at this high level of experience for people. And I said that could get into an exhaustion for you. And he's honest about it, or at least he is with me. So don't talk about anybody who's hurt. And that you're always preparing for that level up here of experience. And here, I said, we laughed. I'm like, well, down here, our level of experience is down here. So if people get a slightly good experience, they walk home, that was good. Or let's say, well, at least Father Chris didn't preach 20 minutes today. Well, that was good. You know, like, because when we're down here, it's not a bad place to be. I mean, we're not talking about doing our best. We're just talking about experientially about what you're talking about. There's something there sacramentally that's beyond. It's the mystery where the mind can't. Now, I'll tell you, Grace Church loves to have a consumer mentality. That's honest. We have to be honest with each other. And sometimes one's experience at work, at high-level places, think that's how the personnel should be here. And I'm like, okay, wherever you work, tell me what that person makes, or have them come work for us. Because what that person makes in your office that maintains the high level that you're used to is making more than the clergy. Now you're talking about, you see what I'm saying, how now that's one, and then the other piece is I go to my country club and they shine my shoes. And here, nobody's shining my shoes. Now I'm trying to infatuate it a little bit, but to say that that's not the experience here. So you have to leave behind what's in it for me, or how is it going to take care of me. Because if you come at it that way, life is gracious enough that it actually will aggravate you. When people come to me and they're aggravated about X, Y, or Z, I'm like, well, let's talk about that. Why are you telling me? So you can fix it. Okay, we're going in two different directions, because I'm going in the direction of what is in it for you to learn and to grow into. Does that make sense? So the Episcopal Church does provide for that. And the idea that I don't have to, like, agree with Bishop Lee, because I don't on a lot of things. And it's okay to say, Jeff, I don't agree with you. And I won't tell you the frequency of that, but I do. And it's okay for you to say, Chris, I don't agree with you. And we don't walk away. We just know that's a part of our life together, which is different in Rome and in some more conservative traditions. There is a codified way that you have to speak, say, and act if you're going to be affirmed in certain ways. Does that make sense? And to me, that's contrary. I mean, it has a place at certain places. I remember where I was a literalist about things in my life. I was a pain in the butt to be around, I think. But then life grounded me up in a way that I had to accept grace or suffer or die. I'm not any different from any of your struggles. And if I said I was, you'd say, that's not true. Right? Because we talked about it. So, what does it mean that you're meditation? Because your minds will play with that in a way to say, I don't understand. And I'm giving you permission to say, yes, you will not understand it that way. You will experience it, not understand it. Is that fair enough? Is that fair to say? So what I'd like to do, not today because we're out of time, is to sort of, what do we say? What do we prime the pump? I was on a farm guy. Should we prime the pump, Charlie?
You bet.
I think that gets the other water flowing, right? If you didn't prime it, it wouldn't flow.
Correct.
Okay. If you're going to use a metaphor, you better make sure it works. The idea, what I would love to do, now here's the fun thing. There are lots of masters in this community. 2 are sitting here right now that I know have a wonderful practice in their meditation. And I would like to begin to perhaps lead ways that you can experience meditation. Is that okay to do?
Sure.
I mean, I want to take some time to say, what would it look like to maybe try these different forms? I did one with the men, a guided one. I think you were there, imagery guided. And the youth like it too, because you get the mind engaged in an image, and it stops on that thought that I have lots of homework, and they get to ride with the image. And so maybe there are guided meditations, there are sounds and tonalities that you can experience, and just kind of play with it a little bit in your life. But we can show you some things here that could perhaps enhance or open up the essence of the meditation that you are. Does that sound crazy?
Can we, at the next session, attempt to reconcile the Buddhist thought that we are all one, which I agree with. I mean, the birds and the flowers are not different. We live in an environment. And their ultimate is that you're it. They used to say that in Sanskrit. I don't know why I remember that. But we as Christians say, you're not it. You know, it's your, Jesus says, your obligation to go help someone else. It's not about me. And I think they're the same,
Yeah.
because we're all the same.
Yeah, I love what you're wrestling with. Some of the challenge is the West has developed a certain systemized way to understand it, which is fine. That's what I said. In certain parts of your journey, I mean, you got to put the square in the square peg. But there's a place where you have a square peg, but the hole's round. And you say, how does this not work, or how does it work? And what do Buddhists, what is the language that is universal? You know, we're particular in that we articulate it around the person of Jesus. But in my own life, and I would like to share that with you, because I also I'm a Christian, and I affirm Jesus as my Savior. But how do I understand that in my life and what that means? And one of the hardest things, it's fun that you say this, Charlie, because I pick on you when we talk about the kingdom of heaven. Every time I see you and I talk about that, I make you point and speak to the entire congregation about, Charlie, where is that? And you do what? Yeah, but that was different than what you just did a few seconds ago, because you wanted to say that Jesus was somewhere other than, which means we have to be in pursuit of it, and I just want you to know you don't, because it pursues you. How do you get into a place? And Jesus said, and I'll show you in the scriptures, or it said, didn't I tell you, I think it's in the Psalms, didn't I say to you that you are all God's? Now that got Jesus crucified, right? And what does that mean? And that's that mutual indwelling of how I work that out. And for me, it was the Buddhists that had to unwrap my thinking around the Western systemized way of, I have to pursue God. And I had one master that said, why? Well, because when I die, I want to go to heaven. Well, where's heaven? You know, and this whole thing of, well, I'm just living good now, so I have the better later. And that's contrary to what you said, because helping others is not, why do you do that? Well, you do that so you continually discover your own need and impoverishment for you, not so you can go rescue somebody else. This is an interesting thing about outreach, is that why do we do outreach? Well, to help somebody else. And then we have this class elitism. You need me to help you. Well, that isn't how it works. I hear it a lot, but no, I come to you because you have the essence to help me discover my own inner poverty and the own mutual indwelling of God within me. I hear it all. When people go to help somebody, they say, you'll get more out of it than you ever gave. That means that there's something you are receiving versus giving that far outweighs. So we can talk about that another time, but I would love to do that. And I can only talk about it from my experience, and I could bring in a Buddhist master and talk about it from their experience too, but it could be fun to do. Okay, good?
Yeah.
We can continue. So next week, I need you both to arm wrestle.
Nick, I can call him. Okay.
So in the next few weeks, and then I'm going to come back in and circle back in, and I'll lead one too, just so you can kind of continue to dialogue, you know, experience something and see.
So does that mean you won't be here next week, or you will be here next week?
No, I'm not. because I'm just one part of this. I recognize there are people that are far greater than I am. And I want to see them, allow them to do that too.
Understood.
So Nick, or David, next week, and then we'll let you know. Okay, good enough?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.